Hi, welcome to the Spiritual Parenting video series. I'm Michelle Anthony, and today our topic is service. We are going to be talking about a very important aspect of our hearts. Literally serving is a posture of our heart. And in God's word, Jesus says that the greatest among you will be the servant among you. And yet we live in a world where that isn't necessarily the prime thing that we are called to, right? We're called to look out for number one. We're called to serve ourselves and to be self-indulgent. And so when we're raising kids or grandkids and we see them living in a world that's telling them these lies, it's really important for us to create an environment in our home where we elevate service and we elevate what God says about it in His Word. And today, my guest is Chantel Taylor, and she is a mom and a grandma, and also you are in the outreach department at your church. You serve in outreach. So this is like right in your wheelhouse of everything
Passionate about service
that you stand for, right? So talk to me a little bit about why service is so important to you and to your family.
Absolutely. I mean, just like you were mentioning, it's no surprise to any of us, and it's no secret that we live in a very self-seeking and self-promoting, a lot of me in our culture, a lot of you do you, boo-boo in our culture. And so if you want to create a different kind of culture in your family, a different kind of environment, you have to be so intentional to do that. And it is kind of like swimming upstream. You know, if as soon as you stop,
right, the current will take you away.
It will take you away. So just being really intentional in that space. My husband and I were passionate is the right word about raising humans who could see other humans, who could look at other people and value who they were, what they carry for the kingdom, and see beyond themselves. And I think that that's something that service and serving really teaches us.
Did you start that at a young age? And if so, like what were some of the things you did even at the earliest stages of their lives?
Absolutely. This is a great question because as the kids got older, I definitely noticed that it became more and more difficult to incorporate some of this service. And so the things that we did at the really young ages really served us well in the later seasons when it became busier and schedules became a little more difficult to manage. I can think of two things that we did right off the top of my head. One of them was we really changed the language around serving in our household. One thing we just didn't do was use the word chores. And I know you mentioned in the book, like you guys had a really different take on chores as well, which is so important. But we didn't use that word. One, because it kind of already had a negative connotation.
Yes, agreed.
But another, because we focused so much on our personal responsibilities. And we use those words instead, like what needs to be done, essentially. You know, and we wanted them to focus on serving from a place of there's a need, we're going to meet the need, instead of there's something I have to check the box in order to, you know, do the next thing or to earn the next thing. And so that was a really important thing to us. We also never paid our kids for chores. And I know that that can be such a controversial topic, but we decided early on, like we did not want to attach a monetary value to their service. Because then they're serving not out of a heart to meet a need, but rather out of a motivation to earn something back. And that's not the heart that we're looking for. You know, we want our kids to understand that, yes, there's a need to be met. Yes, it does require sacrifice on our part, but we shouldn't have an expectation to receive something in return.
I love that. I love that from the earliest point, you were wanting to get to the heart of the matter. And I think that that's critical. I think when my kids were little, like really little, like preschool or even younger, we would have little things that they could get stickers or reward because that's developmentally where our kids are at. But as soon as they could understand it, like even by the age of 4, kids can understand doing something out of the goodness of your heart.
Absolutely.
Or because Jesus wants us to do that, or or God would be pleased. And those things are what we do because he loves us and because we love other people. And so I love that you made that the heart of the issue. When I look at Romans chapter 12, Paul is calling us to be living sacrifices. Like he's calling us to sacrifice. And that's not necessarily something that is popular in our world today, right? And he says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. He goes on to say, don't conform to the pattern of this world, because that's what we're living in. But he says, this is your true and proper worship. And what's interesting, and I always have loved this, is that worship, this word worship in the original language in the Greek language is the same word for service. So some translations will say this is your true and proper service, and some will say true and proper worship.
Wow.
How do you see worship and service interchangeable, like in your heart for what service is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a worship leader, I feel really passionate about that too. So what a great question.
Yeah.
But the way that they work together, the sacrifice of praise, I think, is what I think of immediately.
Yeah.
And just what it costs to be a worshiper. Like there is a cost attached to that. There's a cost of being willing to give your all to the Lord, which is what worship is.
Yeah.
So I love that.
So when you shared that with your kids, because I'm sure like as you were getting to the heart of it, did they just jump up with little hearts of worship and do things around your house for each other, or did they push back on you? And then how do you deal with that in that moment?
Yes. So kids are kids. I always tell people, sometimes people meet you in the current chapter and maybe you've had a long time to work with your children and they're like, oh, they're so well behaved and they just do everything that you ask. And I'm like, yeah, but it wasn't always this way.
Oh, well, that's good. That gives hope.
Yes, absolutely. And so much grace for our season. So much grace. Because
we need grace as well, right?
Absolutely.
We have to give that to our kids because we need that as well. So it sounds like you were fostering this attitude of this heart. What were some of the practical things you guys got to do as a family or get to do as a family?
Yeah, great question. So as somebody who works in outreach, I really love this question because since I'm so passionate about creating serve cultures, whether it's in the family or the church or in your community, I feel like my mind is just constantly moving in this direction of like, what can we do?
Yeah.
And so when the kids were younger, it was easier for me. I had more time. I was absolutely honored to be able to stay home with the kids. And so I could plan certain things for them. We could go and do things. We used to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and go take them to people in the park who maybe didn't have a meal that
that's
day.
So simple.
And it is something that's so easy, right? When your kids are little. But then when they get a little bit older and schedules get a little bit busier, we kind of had to pivot and we would do things that maybe outreach projects that were already put together that somebody else had already kind of arranged and we just needed to show up. And that's okay.
That's good.
So there was one that we had here at the church where we came and packed like food bags that were then given to our brothers and sisters out in Guatemala.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
And that was something we could just show up and be a part of.
Right.
It was still so significant for our family. And so it doesn't have to be something extravagant. It just needs to be something that we can weave into our everyday living.
Well, and you use this word at the beginning, you said, and it takes a lot of intentionality. And for families who are just busy, maybe just trying to get through the day, do the homework, the carpool, the meals, whatever it is, how do you carve out this time for intentionality? Are you saying like maybe be thinking about something once a month? Is it once a week? Where do you put this in your calendar to make sure that it's intentional?
Absolutely. I think this goes back to what I was just saying about making sure that it fits in your life. Just like any kind of new habit that you want to introduce, it can't be difficult or else it just won't get done. You might be able to do it a couple of times.
Start small.
Right. Start small. Weave something in that fits really naturally in your already everyday rhythms.
Yeah.
And so that can be something as simple as writing a birthday card to a friend.
You're right.
Baking a cake and bringing it to the neighbors.
Yep.
It can be something right there at home. I'm giving a word of encouragement to a sibling or writing something positive about mom or your teachers.
Yeah. And those are a lot of times we're doing those things, but we're not overtly calling out like, this is an act of service. This is your act of worship today.
Right.
So I think if even just getting creative to think of the things you're already doing and then just attaching this word to it, I think that can be helpful. I know when one of the things that we used to do when my kids were younger and I was making dinners on the regular is that I would just make double. And then we'd either freeze it or we knew of somebody that needed a meal at that time and we would get in the car and do that. Another fun thing that we did when the kids were little was called Cookie Ding Dong Ditch. And we would make cookies. And do you remember Ding Dong Ditch when we were kids? So sort of redeeming.
What a positive spin.
Yeah, it was redeeming being naughty in your neighborhood, I guess. But we'd make cookies and we'd write little notes and then we'd go, sneak up, ring the doorbell and then run. But it would have a blessing or a verse or some word of encouragement. And so it is an act of service because we made something for you and we're taking the time to write it, but maybe we don't always think about it in that framework. And I just have to tell you, just last month, I got a video of my daughter who now is a mom of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they did Cookie Ding Dong Ditch, and it was so fun to watch the legacy of that carry on.
That's what it's all about.
And so that's so fun. Like, I like how you're saying it's all those little natural things we're already doing. Give it the language, give it that space, that intentionality to pause and say, this is what we're doing. This is our act of worship right now. You have a phrase. In our home, we use the phrase, what needs to be done, because I wanted them to have eyes to see rather than me just always telling them what to do, because if our goal is to raise humans that are worshiping God and serving others for the long haul, they don't wake up. I didn't wake up this morning and get a chore chart. You probably didn't either.
Right.
I make myself my own chore charts, but nobody's telling me what to do. So I have to cultivate that with God, like what needs to be done, and then have that discernment.
Right.
You had a phrase. What was your phrase?
Yes. So our phrase was similar, but it was see a need, meet a need.
I like that.
I do too.
See a need, meet a need.
A simple way to keep your eyes open for, hey, what's going on around me? Is there something that I can step into and have a help to serve in?
And so were you like a play calling at times, like see a need, meet a need? Did you sometimes prompt
in the
them?
background, just a little acronym?
That's true. Like they hear mom's voice still, right?
There's a need. There's a need.
Yes. My kids say that too. They'll say like, I still hear what needs to be done. And we're leaving a space and I don't really want to help, but they'll say like, Mom, I still just hear your voice in the back of my head.
So good.
But that's good. I mean, of all the voices they could be hearing us say, what needs to be done or see a need, meet a need is good.
Amen.
What kind of encouragement can you give to our families who are listening today that really maybe have cultivated an environment in their home that's more self-indulgent or me-centered? How can they start today? What's something they can do today to maybe switch that trajectory of their home?
Absolutely. So I think if parents are resonating with this idea of seeing a need, meeting a need, or what needs to be done, that's a very easy thing to be able to incorporate, to be able to just switch that language. It's a quick switch.
Yeah.
And start talking about like, hey, there's a need here. There's toys on the floor. Like, what could you do to meet the need for them to return back to their home?
Right.
It's a very simple language switch, but also some additional things that I think we've done over the years. You can Google and Pinterest all kinds of ideas.
Wow, that's really great.
How can we serve in our community? How can we serve each other here at home? And I've created documents like that where I'll pick 30 different things, and then we'll take those items, write them down and put them in a fun little jar. And then somebody can pick one item out of the jar, and maybe that's the thing that we focus on either for the day or for the week or maybe even for the month.
This idea. Yeah.
Just so that it's easy. It's easy.
Yeah. And if they pick one out that's they don't want to do, they can put it back in.
And pick another one. If they pick one that you don't want to do as a mom, you're like, no, we don't have time for that right now.
That's true.
You have some options.
That's true. I love that idea. That's a practical way. And even I think, depending on the ages of your children, but they could help make that jar with you. I know some other people have written down like a daily calendar, 30 things that they can do. And maybe these are even just resources we can put online, but these are great practical ways just to get our families thinking about serving and service and what needs to be done. I know one of the ways that we encouraged our children outside of the selfishness and the serving was to take them not only on local outreach, like you've said, get involved with your church and your city. Those are so important, in your home, your neighborhood, but also globally. I think that was important for them to have a global mindset, a worldview that was outside, and maybe some seeing that not all kids had necessarily what they had. And that was something that we encouraged our children to do. And we had the opportunity to do that, me being on staff at a church and different things. But I know you serve in your outreach department at your church. Are there opportunities for families, for kids and students to go on these kind of trips? And what do you think the impact is on their lives?
Absolutely. You know, some of the most impactful trips that we have are for teenagers.
Yeah, you're right.
When teens can go and see how other people live, can get their eyes on a different culture, whether that's just food or music or just how their houses are and how they live. It expands their viewpoint and their perspective, which is so important, especially for those of us who live in the West and we just think the whole world looks like here in America. You know, and that's just not a reality. And so to build that kingdom mindset of, hey, we're inclusive. And when we get to heaven, it's going to be all colors and all shades and all the people. Like to have a taste of that while you're here on earth, that is truly, truly impactful for people.
I agree. And I think as parents, we can get overprotective and not want to send our kids out there. But this is also plays into another one of the environments that I talk about in spiritual parenting, which is getting out of your comfort zone. But we have to get out of our comfort zone too if we really want our kids to have hearts of service. But Chantel, thank you so much for being here today. And I especially love this because you have the same name as my daughter.
Oh, precious.
And I haven't met very many Chantels. And so I'm really just thankful for the way that you raised your kids and that you've inspired them and your grandkids and the way that you have chosen to intentionally put this into your home. And so thank you for just sharing that with us and our listeners. And if you want more information about this environment of service or how to implement this into your own home, you can read chapter 6 in my spiritual parenting book, or you can check out our spiritual parenting curriculum that's attached to these videos. Thanks so much for joining us.